in that sessions area, we have a very hot topic being discussed. It's about diversity, equity, and inclusion in angel investing. I'm thrilled that Eli Velasquez is moderating this particular panel. Eli oversees the U.S. State Department Global Investors Program. He has assisted with training, supporting, and launching new angel networks in Malaysia, Indonesia, Egypt, Vietnam, Mexico, and Colombia. He also serves as capital advisor to the Stanford Latino Business Action Network and U.S. Senator for the World Business Angel Forum. He is an investor in Portfolio's Rising America Fund, an advisor to Excel Hub Venture Partners, the Business Angel Minority Association, and is actively building a national network of investors of color. I met Eli a couple years ago when he was actually here in Michigan in his capacity with VentureWell. He helped us with one of our first Angel 101 events, recruiting a dynamic speaker to come in and walk people through the basics of angel investing. Also on this panel, you are going to hear about a new angel group in Detroit. That's one of the things that's been kind of exciting to see this past year, or past 2 years actually, are the number of new groups in the state that have started to pop up. You've already heard about, the Grosse Pointe Angels. Point Angels is fairly new. Woodward Angels in Detroit. Flint has a new angel group, by the way. We'll be talking about angel groups later in one of the other sessions this afternoon. But there's a new one focused on diversity, diverse investors investing in diverse companies. It's headquartered in Detroit. And so one of the panelists with this particular panel is the leader of Commune Angels, that new group that just started up.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be joining us in your part of the world. Welcome to the Michigan Angel Summit and this session on increasing diversity, equity, and inclusivity into your angel networks and in your angel ecosystems. I'm going to be your moderator for this session. My name is Eli Velasquez. I'll introduce myself and the other panelists in just a moment. But we're going to be talking about the importance of inclusivity, equity, diversity, why it's going to be so vital to be including this as part of the strategy of how you build your networks, independent of the current state of society. So I want to set the norms very quickly, just so that we understand how we move forward. There's a lot of discussion out there on this topic, and so there is no one way to approach this. So we want to be very open-minded in how we have this discussion, and I want you to be fearless as you approach the questions in the chat space. We will use Black, we use Latinx, we use Black and Brown, we use women, Indigenous, LGBTQ, diversity, equity, inclusivity, BIPOC. I don't even know all the acronyms that are out there now, right? And so this is a conversation that we all need to be having. And I don't want you to be afraid to approach it with, I just don't know, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And so we have a really great set of panelists here who are going to help us navigate some of these discussion topics as well. So again, I'm Eli Velasquez. I'm with an organization called VentureWell. Our premise is moving early stage science and technology innovation to market. And so we work very closely with the angel communities to help facilitate investments into our companies. I also serve on the Angel Capital Association board, and I'm also launching a national network of investors of color. And we're going to dive into all of these issues as well. I've also co-founded an angel network in the past, so I bring some experience in the challenges and the opportunities in helping to build that ecosystem. But what I want to start with first is our panelists. And independent of just giving us the standard, introduction about who you are and who you work with, I want you to describe your personal journey, your background, your personal journey on how you came to be an angel investor or how you came to be into the angel investment ecosystem, because that's going to tie into the broader discussion of how we engage more investors of color and more diversity into our network. So Sonia, let me turn it over to you.
Hi, it's very nice to be here. Thank you, Eli. It's a pleasure. I'm Sonia Sapaban. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Our Office. Our Office provides diversity inclusion as a service. So it's an all-in-one affordable subscription package for any company of any size to start building a culture of diversity and inclusion with a dedicated expert, a proven process, and the data and technology that's needed. Before, just a couple of years ago when I became an entrepreneur and a founder, before that, I was an investor. I really came into investing through the corporate route. I'm an engineer by training. I have been a corporate CTO at Fortune 500 companies in aerospace and defense industry. And in 2009, at one of the major corporations in the area, there in facility in Sterling Heights, we decided to build an innovation center. And it was clear that startups were going to be a large part of our R&D portfolio. And so that got me started really interacting, engaging, working with a lot of the startups, both in the local Southeast Michigan area and across the country. A couple of years later, I met my good friend Skip Sims, who is a leader in the area, in Ann Arbor. And that got me introduced to the Michigan Angel Fund. And as they say, the rest is history. We can talk about it later, but I kind of got into angel investing by that route and really, really enjoyed it.
That's great. And are you a Michigan native, Sonia?
I am not, but I will tell you that Michigan is definitely my second home. I am in Los Angeles on the West Coast, but I spent about 7 years in the area, living there and reverse commuting to LA. So I finally came back in 2016 to this area, but I still, hopefully when travel starts again, I used to spend a lot of time still in Michigan. I have a second home there and a lot of great Michigan friends still.
That's great. Terrence, let me turn it over to you. What's your story? That's excellent. So we're going to dive into some specific advice. I'll give you my background. Born and raised in El Paso, Texas, border community. Went to school in Boston, studied mechanical engineering. Went all the way to the West Coast, Sonia, and worked for the Boeing company in Huntington Beach. As my pathway was all engineering, and I thought I was just going to pursue that path the whole time. And then I decided to go to law school at night. And transitioned over into Boeing's law department and was doing IP work for Boeing. At that stage, I said, I think I have some skills that I can bring back to my home community. So moved back to my hometown of El Paso and found that there was really no startup ecosystem. There was no patent attorney to be found. There was no angel capital, no venture capital. So if you're out there listening and you say, that sounds like my community. So rolled up our sleeves and said, we got to go build it. We got to recruit it. We got to start it. I started managing a very small angel group that was trying to really mobilize capital in the community. And they had a deep focus on solely investing locally. And in a startup ecosystem that didn't have a lot of deal flow, they struggled to get that deal flow going. Eventually, and unfortunately, that angel network went south because they could not really mobilize that capital. I then got recruited to go head up commercialization efforts at Texas Tech University in Lubbock. And what I learned there was they had been trying for about 20 years to start a new angel group, but had sort of the same kind of mentality of, well, we only want to invest local and we only want to invest in university spin-outs. And I said, if you only want to do that, then you're only going to fail. And so over time, we convinced the group to really expand their network, expand their geographic focus, expand their industry focus, and be a lot more interested in diverse deal flow. Let's look at things from across the state. Let's look at things from across the nation. And let's go out there and really pick some really good deals that ultimately generate good returns for you so that you can be a better investor and a stronger investor in local communities. So that's what helped drive that angel network. They're still going to this day. They've invested about $5 million in about 30 deals since about 2015 because they went at it with a different approach. So that's a good story that I like to tell along the way. And then since then, since joining VentureWell, I oversee a program for the State Department that helps us start angel groups and mobilize angel groups in other countries. And the problems and issues that we see here are the same problems we're seeing in Malaysia, and Egypt, and Latin America, with trying to really activate angel investors at the very early stages who may be risk averse. So my next question to you all is, when we're looking at, and let's start here with a focus on investors of color, and again, how you define that is up to you. Minority investors, however you want to define that. The experience that they need, only comes over time. The access that they need is hard to find. For those investors, there's a lot of interest, right? There's a real interest in this. For each of you, and I'll start with you, Terrence, and I'll move over to Sonia. How can investors of color begin their journey? How do they even start? Where do they look? What should they start doing? What are the top 2 or 3 things that you would advise those new investors to start with to get involved in this ecosystem? Yeah, I love that, Terrence, and I think it's really appropriate because angel investors don't walk around with a name tag that says I'm an angel investor, nor do they look like anything that you might perceive them to look like on television. You have 3 angel investors on this call. We could walk right past you in the grocery store and you would never know, right? So that's so important that you really integrate into these ecosystems and you start identifying who the players are in there. Sonia, same question for you. Where should they start? How should they start?
Sure, absolutely. Of course, I agree exactly with what Terrence said. I'm going to expand this, beyond really the ethnically diverse. Obviously, that's very important because only about 2% of all VC investors are Hispanic and fewer than 1% are Black. So clearly, that's an area of great focus and needs to continue to increase that. Women also, it's only 8% of the investors are women. And often, as you say, people can't just go and find angels, right? It's not on our resumes. There's nowhere really that you can do that easily. And warm intros are usually how you get introduced, by someone who knows a group or knows angels. So I would say this. I would say that one of the really great ways is as you start to think about this as an area and an asset class that you're interested in, is to first think about your own skills. What skills do you have? Everybody has a skill or something they do in their regular job. And it could be anything, right? It could be a technical skill. It could be your legal background. It could be supply chain. It could be all kinds of things. And then think of which vertical you're interested in. We talk about verticals a lot in our industry. And so what do you really care about? Do you care about consumer type businesses? Do you care about, more you have background in corporate and you're interested in enterprise software maybe, or just different areas, health, financial, different areas. And then sometimes if you don't have a local community of startups, like what's your story, Eli, yourself, where you went back home and there wasn't much of there. Now that everything is virtual, you can always find a network or something to join, but it is much better if you're targeted because you can, reach out and start spending a lot of time with different groups and different things, especially going on online. But if you kind of know what you have to offer, what skills you bring, and what vertical you're interested in, that can then start focusing your attention. And online, you can find, a lot of events like this that you can join. Also, I think the universities, academia these days, even if you don't have a startup group in your, a network or some kind of a real ecosystem around your area, often there is a university with a business school that offers something around entrepreneurship and the tech sector. And that's a way to get involved and just learn a little bit and hone your skills. There's also really great books that, of course, these days you can read about it. But more importantly, usually whoever is teaching it, and also other people that go to that class, you can begin a little bit of a network to go beyond just the what you can do on your own. So I think there's a lot of this, and really everything going virtual, it almost makes it easier now.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's opened up a whole new world. One of the, I absolutely agree with everything both of you said. Now I put in a shameless plug for the Angel Capital Association. That's a membership organization for professional angel investors that are accredited. You can join the organization. It offers education. It offers access to networks. There's syndication calls. But that's representing over 14,000 accredited angel investors across North America. Over 250 angel networks, family offices, and platforms. So that's definitely a community that exists and is available for those individuals seeking to learn how to really understand what's going on in the space. I want to transition over to the next question. Is when you're looking at impact, and this is obviously a huge issue that even to me I get confused about, because we have notions of, well, we want to activate more investors. We want to activate more capital. We want to support more founders. We want more LPs to focus on first-time fund managers, but we also need more first-time fund managers. My head spins when I start thinking about what is it that we're trying to do here? What's the impact that we're trying to solve for, if you will? So Sonia, I'll start with you. What drives impact? What's that impact look like for you?
So as I shared some of the stats, certainly something needs to be done. And you're right, it's kind of a multivariant problem. You have this issue both on the founder side and on the investor side. But at the end of the day, the way I look at this is, the investment ecosystem is the greatest economic engine anywhere in the world, and especially in this country. So the opportunity to create wealth, either on the investor side or on the founder side, is huge compared to any other industry. So it's obvious that this community can have a huge impact on diversity and inclusion just overall. And I can also benefit from attracting investors and founders from diverse backgrounds. So I think one of the ways that I've always thought, but especially now that I'm on this side of it, trying to improve diversity and inclusion, I think of it more is, the investment community can use, our influence and help the portfolio companies build more diversity and inclusion into their DNA from the beginning. This isn't something you can put off. No company is too small, and it only gets harder as you go forward. It's like a tree. If you don't prune it from the beginning, it's very hard once it's, has a big trunk, to go back and say, oh, we want some diversity in here. And there's many examples. I mean, the FANG companies of the world, the Facebook and Google and Apple and so on have been trying, but their progress, especially across, structurally across all levels of their teams is really dismal, I think, compared to other feats that these great technology companies are able to achieve. Their achievement in this area is very slow. I think once you do that, once you attract more founders and you start supporting more companies that are truly putting diversity and inclusion as one of their key focus areas on the startup side, you will start to attract more investors, because investors, it's personal. Angel investing is personal. You're writing a check from your personal bank account. I know that oftentimes, especially when you do a chunk, like, you're part of a fund, like the Michigan Angel Fund, I used to always look at my bank account the day after and see, that big hole there, afterwards, right? So it is something where when you write a, $20,000, $50,000 check to a company, so there is that connection. It's not like institutional investing where, you're just managing other people's money and you have these LPs. So I think that if any fund, any investment community, any network that has more diverse founders and founding or management teams of the portfolio companies that are more not just diverse, but also inclusive. Because diversity is actually, and we'll talk about this later maybe, diversity is much easier to achieve. But it's not sustainable, and it's not a long-term strategy. You really have to focus on building a culture of inclusion from day one. And the way we do that is, a lot of companies say, oh, we're too small, we can't do this. We'll do it when we go past, our Series A or, Series B or C or whatever it is. And there's always this, and they're very busy, especially all companies are busy, but especially in the startup community. And the venture community, because of the high growth, management teams tend to be just really, really busy. I know it now because this is like the hardest job I've ever done. Of course, it's also the most enjoyable, as a founder. So we provide the way we're making that impact. The second part of your question, Eli, is with this idea of diversity and inclusion as a service, we make it super easy. We start with just giving you a person, an expert, a dedicated expert that's on a subscription basis. And then, they start by the first, period of just understanding what you're doing, your industry, what your objectives are, and creating a D&I plan for you and for your company. And then they stay with you, through the process. And we also, of course, the data, the technology, the software platform that makes all that very easy. So I like to say that today, if whether it's a VC firm, whether it's a network of angels or anybody, any key stakeholders in the community that really want to improve it, with a with a turnkey kind of a easy solution that's pretty affordable, there's really no excuse not to do it. We just wanted to remove the excuses. Yeah. And so when you get started, it kind of builds upon itself. People, once they have the awareness, it all goes from there. We already are working with one VC firm. We are expanding it and talking to some more to offer this so that it can be one of the services. VC firms and angel networks, they often provide, some kind of, services like access to legal services, to other kinds of advice and support. So this could be part of that package, or it could at least just be making their portfolio companies aware, and also kind of letting them know that this is important to them.
Right. That's good. Really good. Terrence, what about you? What impacts are you driving towards? Yeah, it's been interesting, Terrence, that we have come across so many folks like that as well. Again, they don't even know that they themselves are. How do you engage them in the asset class, right? And so I want to transition over to beyond the why diversity matters. Like the answer is, well, it's the right thing to do. Let's get beyond that, and let's get into like some real tactical solutions. What's the business case for investing in diversity, equity, inclusivity? What's the business case for including more investors of color in your ecosystem? Why should they matter, right? If I put on my investor hat, I'm looking at deals, I'm looking at risk, I'm looking at returns, right? So let's look at it from an analytical perspective. Why should this matter? And I'll start with you again, Terrence. That's great. Sonia, before I move on to you, Sonia, I want to encourage the viewers to put your questions in the chat, and we'll address those questions at the end of this session. So, Sonia, please, what's the business case?
Sure. Well, first of all, I can't agree more with Terrence. It's about being intentional. It's not enough anymore, especially in 2020, to be okay. I'm not biased. Certainly, we want these things, and just to support it in spirit. It has to be in action. It has to be intentional, and we have to think of doing something different, because what we have been doing, the progress has been really extremely slow, and we just won't get us there. So I just had to say that. But for the business case, we just published a blog actually on this topic this week. I didn't even know, Eli, you were going to ask this question, but it's funny. It's on our website, ouroffice.io, and we have these blog section, and this is actually the topic, because we think about it in two ways. One part of it is what we call the diversity dividend. HBR has called it that. I'll give them credit for that, of course. According to a 2018 piece they had, this is the more, what we are kind of more familiar with. If you have more diverse representation, then you can see more, hard like data associated with financial performance. And so I'll just throw a couple there that's related to the investment community. They actually looked at, in their 2018 piece, they looked at the VC ecosystem as one where you're controlling for many factors. It's actually easier to look at that ecosystem and get a clearer picture. And they looked at, how similar the investment partner backgrounds were, and then looked at, performance. So they did along several different, dimensions of similarity of background, including what school they came from and so on. But one in particular, for example, ethnicity, they saw that the success rate, in terms of exits and IPO or other exit events, was lower by anywhere from 26% to 32% lower, success rate when partners had similar ethnicity, compared to diverse teams. On larger studies like BCG is out there. There's many of these. I'm just mentioning a couple kind of off the top of my head. They saw that the diverse management teams deliver, I think, close to 20% higher revenues, top line, from innovation compared to their less diverse counterparts. That they also enjoyed over 2 times, factor of 2 times higher cash flow per employee. This was according to Deloitte, I think. So these are the clear data about this. And if someone is unaware of it, they just need to educate themselves, as Terrence was saying earlier. The harder measure is what we like to call our new definition of ROI. And this is, what our blog is about. So the new ROI, and we call it return on inclusion. There is, again, a lot of studies that show that highly diverse and inclusive organizations show much higher, 20-30%, higher levels of collaboration, more team commitment, that, they make decisions faster. So these are all things according to Gartner, Forbes. Again, this data is starting to emerge. It's been more challenging to measure inclusion and to report on it, but there is data now emerging in that regard. And I think it's very exciting that all this data is all pointing in one direction, and then the society is also experiencing some events. Like this really amazing window of opportunity to actually make some progress.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to throw out these statistics because I ask myself the same question: was why should I invest in this space? And so when I dig down and actually just do a little bit of research, you talk about the consumer buying power of Black and Latinos, $3+ trillion. You look at the 45% of millennials are Black and Latino. They influence media, consumer, sports, fashion, consumer. Right? That's the area they influence. By 2030, over 50% of first-time home buyers will be Latinos. You look at whether you like this or not, but the healthcare issues of our generation, high blood pressure, diabetes, and unfortunately COVID-19. So if you're an investor and you put your investor hat on, you look at healthcare, you look at real estate, you look at fashion, sports, media, tech, education. Our communities are driving those markets. And so if you are in any way, shape, or form, even an amateur economist, go where the hockey puck is going, right? Skate to where that puck is going. That's where those market trends are going. And if you surround yourself with more investors, more diverse investors, they can help you access that deal flow. They can help you access those communities and draw those deals closer to you. I also work with the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative. They have in their portfolio 600 companies that generate $1 million or more in revenue. So if you say, well, Eli, the startup space is a little too risky for me. I want companies that have traction. I have a list of 600 companies that Stanford has worked with closely that you can go in and start funneling through and understand what their business model is to link into. So the notion of lack of pipeline, I squash that argument very fast because it is definitely not a pipeline issue. I want to jump into the last question for us, and then we'll do some closing thoughts. For those networks who say, I want to do this, I want to get engaged, I want to get involved, but I don't know how. How do I access these networks? How do I find these individuals? Let's work it in reverse. The first was investors of color trying to get in. Now other investors are trying to find those investors of color. How does that work? And Sonia, I'll start with you.
Well, again, I think it goes back to something that Terrence said up front, and you just said about, how do we find, it all comes down to being intentional. I mean, the first thing to me is being intentional about these things. These things don't happen on their own. You can't just say, put out, a statement that says, we want to be more diverse. We're looking for this. You have to actually go out and do the hard work first of educating yourself. If you don't know what's out there, frankly, again, with all the resources that are available online and some of the other ideas that we talked about earlier, there's a way to always connect with someone to help you know where to reach, where to go. I really love the example you just got of the 600 companies, that is, a Stanford related group. So this is a resource, right? So first it starts with educating, and then the hard work to get involved and actively reach out to those groups and associations and schools and companies to seek out those diverse connections. I think really the word of 2020 is action. Is actively reaching out, and it doesn't have to be, oh, let's go study this for the next 6 months and come up with some big grand plan. We talk about micro actions. Actually, part of our whole process, proven process that we use is these micro actions. Is do what you can, even if you know a few people. Just reach out to a small group. It doesn't have to be on a grand scale. A lot of times, just in diversity and inclusion in general, progress is slow because everybody thinks it's so hard and they don't know where to start, and they think they have to do something big, and they don't know what that is. But really, if we think as just human beings, we can all think of ways. And we all know some people, just because, as you say, the diversity of the of communities and of our country is changing, and of the world, frankly. So it really takes to, I would say, be intentional, get educated, and then outreach. Go out and do the hard work to connect with those networks and other people.
Absolutely. Terrence, your thoughts? That's absolutely right. And we one of the research elements that we did, we started studying the investors of color ecosystem, and we've identified at least to date about 550 like well vetted investors of color that we have in our database. And we welcome folks to come join with us. Reach out to us, reach out to me, Sonia, Terrence, any one of them. But we're coalescing a community under the investorsofcolor.org to help really mobilize a national network of investors of color. And so what folks have said on this call is reach out. We're more than happy to start engaging in those conversations. It can't just all be one way. It's got to be both ways, where we reach out to each other and we start having those conversations that we mentioned at the top of the hour. So I'll close here with leaving you each to give me your big takeaway for our audience before we transition to Q&A. So Sonia, the one key takeaway that you want our audience to get.
Well, this is a historic moment, I think, in our country. On a grand scale, there's really a window of opportunity for the investment community to truly contribute and move the needle forward in a meaningful way. It's also an opportunity for establishing a brand for years to come. So my takeaway is really be intentional and take advantage of this moment. If you don't know how to do that, there are resources. There are many resources. The one we can offer is, ouroffice.io. Please go there and just contact us. We can help any network of investors, any startups in the community. There's really no reason. We try and leave no reason for anybody to say, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. We've made it extremely affordable. We're really doing this since I come from this community, to make an impact in this community. And so our program and the approach that we have is really suited very well. But again, there's other opportunities. We're not the only ones. There's just do something, take an action towards it. And as you get started, I promise it gets easier. It looks hardest at the beginning.
Great. Thank you, Sonia. Terrence. Awesome. And my closing thoughts are, I firmly believe that the angel community is going to be absolutely vital in helping our economy recover. And I believe that the more hands we have at play and the more hands we have lifting, the easier it's going to be and the faster it's going to be. And so I feel like this asset class is going to absolutely be vital toward this recovery efforts. And so I'm encouraging as many folks to get involved with as many people as we possibly can to make sure that we are all engaged and that we're all pushing in a direction that really helps move this country forward. So I'm really excited about what the future brings. I'm excited to bring you investor networks. I want to thank Skip and the whole Michigan Angel community for inviting us to have this discussion. I welcome a part 2 and a part 3 and a part 100 to this conversation because it's going to keep going and growing. So Terrence, thank you so much for your time. Sonia, thank you so much for your time as well. We're going to transition over to Q&A.
Good afternoon. How are you, Terrence? Oh, Sonia, how are you?
Hi, I'm very good. How are you?
Doing well. It's glad to see you. Good to see everybody. Great discussion on our webinar. We have a lot of great attendees here. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go along. Francis, I know you put a question in there talking about ways that we are intentional, and you said your question was answered. But I'd like to kind of open it up just a little bit and start with that. Terrence, I'm curious to see you maybe an additional perspective on Francis's question. In what ways are you bringing intentionality into entrepreneurship and angel investing? You're on mute, Terrence. Let me dive into it maybe from my perspective while we figure out the technical difficulties. Francis, with my organization, VentureWell, we took a good hard look at where we were deploying capital and how we were developing our entrepreneurship programs. We run various programs focused on student innovators and early stage innovators. We deploy over $1 million in grants and training for those innovators. And we took a good hard look and we set some very firm metrics around how we want to support them, where at least 50% of our cohort is made up of underrepresented individuals. Our outreach of universities and other partners are also set at 50% diverse. And we wanted to set a big goal that it wasn't just, representative of the population of America, but actually setting a goal that's going to make us really work hard toward building those relationships and those partnerships. We've also developed, set aside some additional capital for faculty members that are developing innovation and entrepreneurship initiatives for, founders of color and early stage innovators, and help provide seed funding to those faculty members that can be our ambassadors on campus as well. We've also waived membership for the next year for any universities that want to join our network. Our only ask is that they set forth a statement outlining what their intentions are in representing, underrepresented groups and supporting those individuals. And then lastly, we're developing a whole set of courses in conjunction with the Angel Capital Association to really help reach color, because we understand that it goes beyond just the Angel 101 element of it. You really have to incorporate cultural competency as part of it, because investors of color did not grow up, at family dinners learning about how to manage capital and how to make investments. So we want to really incorporate cultural competency into that whole mix before they dive into the Angel 101 element of it. So Terrence, I don't know if you've worked out the technical issues. No, we still can't hear you. Sonia, I don't know if you're able to chime in on this.
Let's see, do you hear me?
Perfect.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Terrence, I had an issue. I might suggest just refresh your screen. That might also do something. Meanwhile, go ahead, please, Eli.
So Francis's question, talking about intentionality and metrics, and I know that was very prevalent in your comment. So I wonder if you could dive into that a little more.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about micro actions. I think, as an individual, you need to think of what you can do, right? And I would say my advice always is pick easy ones first, because it does seem really hard. We have a million other things to do, all of us do. And yet we have good intention. So good intentions are a start, but to be able to take action, I think it's like they say, one step in front, 1 foot in front of the other, and just kind of walk your talk, right? And the second thing that we didn't talk about as much in the segment itself that I could add is find some allies, because it is hard to do these things. This is a historic moment. All of these things that have been going on for 100 years or more, that we've been talking about it visibly and openly, are still around. And the reason is that there's not really one right way. And there's these islands of excellence where people are doing separate things, but when you join hands, nothing great is ever done if, you're just alone and you're trying to do things. So I would say creating some collaborations, some allyships with organizations, with people, with your friends, with whoever seems like-minded. I would also, just one last thing, don't try and change minds. Don't make it hard for yourself. Education is good if somebody genuinely wants to learn and reaches out to you about what you're doing or to learn Obviously, we do that all the time. But, at this time, there's enough people that are both intentional and want to do something about it, that helping them, I think, is a priority, because then the results will speak for themselves. So try and find allyships with people that are like-minded and who already want to do something about it, and see if together you can do something together. It's kind of like going to the gym with a buddy,
Oh,
just
yeah.
do it together. It helps a lot.
Yeah, I usually just let my partner just do all the work.
Yeah, and you mentioned a lot of great specific things to do. So those are great examples. But I think just this conceptually, that's what I can add.
That's great. Terrence, any luck? Oh, Terrence, my apologies. The beauty of Zoom and technology. Maybe you can put some comments in the chat, Terrence. Maybe a couple of things there that we might be able to take away as well. Yeah, and the importance of partnerships is absolutely vital. One of my philosophy, I don't like the blame and shame approach. We're trying to build our systems, and we're trying to build ours from scratch, and so we need as many allies as possible. And we want to learn, right? We want to learn from folks that have done this successfully before and have blazed those trails. So the idea is that we all come together and work together. I want to talk a little bit about founders of color and the way that they pitch and the way that angels should approach them, and how they should maybe train them, or how we look at how founders of color pitch and even go through due diligence. So, Terrence, are you on now?
Let's test. Can you hear me?
Boom, there we go. Perfect. Did you catch the question?
I did not.
Give us your insights or your advice, Terrence, on how investors should look at founders of color and how they pitch, how they work with investors, and maybe some tips and advice for working with them.
I'm not sure if there's anything specific around underrepresented founders that investors should think of. I think the real principal issue for me is making sure that your deal flow pipeline includes underrepresented founders. And I think we may have had this discussion elsewhere, but I think a critical issue and maybe a kind of a hurdle is the concept of a warm intro. And how do we manage the warm intro to ensure that we're getting underrepresented or differently networked people in front of our teams? And so if we optimize our networks for our warm intros and traditional founders, how do we optimize our website or our other channels for underrepresented founders? And I think if we do that, we'll get a really solid balance of all founders with regard to race, gender, ethnicity, or sexual orientation in front of our teams, and we can take advantage of those opportunities in those markets. But I think it's important. It would be great if we had more underrepresented VCs and angel investors within those rooms, to the extent the company is pursuing a diverse market. But our underrepresented founders are pursuing markets and industries just like all of our other founders. And so I don't think there's anything unique except understanding that, to your point, we're not necessarily having these conversations around our dinner table. So there may be some bridging of the conversation, but I have found underrepresented founders to be equally as equipped to have those conversations as others.
Excellent. Sonia, I'll leave you with the final word here in the last 60 seconds.
Sure. I'd like to add to what Terrence just said. I think that what's important for all founders is always to consider the audience, right? Who you're when you get an introduction, or if you just approach somebody cold, just do some research, make sure that you know what things they're interested in. One thing I would add for underrepresented, whether you're a woman or a person of color, is if you know others, you don't necessarily will know most of the angels and investors. That's just the numbers that tell you that, right? You're going to be in the minority. So then there's only a limited number of investors and angels that you can approach that are of the same type of background as yourself, but use those with their connections. Always think of them as a multiplier. I mean, most of them are successful because they know a lot of people who are in the, I'll say, quote unquote, majority, right? And see if they can, because it's really the lack of familiarity, right? I mean, you want empathy in all situations, in all connections, in all relationships. And to create that empathy, it really helps if someone who already knows the investor puts in a nice word for you. You know, it could just be as simple as, oh, you know, I so-and-so has reached out to you. They shared with me that they had reached out to you, and I told them I knew you, and I would just let you know on their behalf that, you know, I think their product's really awesome, or I know this thing about my background with them, or this is how I know them. Just something very simple, whatever they're comfortable doing, will create that initial connection and that familiarity. And I think that is really huge, especially in founder-investor relationships.
Absolutely. Sonia, thank you so much. Terrence, I'm sorry that you were having technical issues, but please reach out to Terrence, reach out to Sonia, reach out to me. Thank you for joining us in the session. And as I said, this is just one part of many other conversations to have. So thank you all for joining us, and enjoy the summit.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.